You're prepping for a trip abroad, maybe to a place you've never been before, and you don't speak the language. Do you A, download a language app and start daily lessons months in advance? B, grab a phrase book last minute and hope for the best? Or C, wing it and rely on gestures and Google Translate? Well, wherever you land, today's guest is here to help. Hey, financially savvy travelers, I'm Danielle Corbett, and I am joined by Lindsay Dow of Lindsay Does Languages. Lindsay is a language educator who has studied over 15 languages to conversational and beyond. Everything from French and Spanish to Mandarin, Japanese, Bulgarian, and Turkish, to name a few. Lindsay's all about making language learning approachable and fun. So we chat about why learning even a little of the local language matters, how much you really need to know before a trip, key phrases every traveler should learn, and so much more. You can learn more about Lindsay's coaching and courses by visiting lindsaydoeslanguages.com and also checking out her YouTube channel at Lindsay Does Languages. As always, all links mentioned will be in the episode description. Now, financially savvy travelers, before we jump in, I have something pretty big to share. I know. Don't worry. Okay, so here it is. So if you want to travel more often, or you finally want to take that one special trip this year, oftentimes the biggest hurdle is knowing how to afford it. Over the last decade, I've shared what works and what doesn't when it comes to budgeting and saving for travel through my books, blog, and this podcast. But now I'm really excited to offer something even more personal. If you've been struggling to save for your next vacation, or you know deep down inside you could be saving more, but just don't know where to start, well, I've got you. I'm now offering one-on-one travel saving strategy sessions where we'll outline your travel goals and create a customized savings plan based on your income, lifestyle, and dream destinations. You could head to the link in the show notes, or you could visit thoughtcard.com/strategy to book your session today. I seriously cannot wait to help you turn those travel dreams into fully funded, debt-free vacations. Welcome to the Thought Card, a podcast about travel and money, where planning, saving, and creativity leads to affording travel, building wealth, and paying off debt. We are the financially savvy travelers. Lindsay, I'm personally really excited to chat with you today because whenever I personally am going to a new to me country, I typically am scrambling to kind of figure out what are a few key phrases that I need to learn? Because for me, I feel like language is a very big part of travel. And when possible, I do try to pick up a few words. And honestly, I feel like when I remember a trip, a lot of times I remember how a local may have corrected me in something. So whether it's like, good morning in Italian or like good morning in Chinese or Mandarin, like I remember how they helped me to say it. And that is something that I remember years later. So I think language does play a big role. So that's kind of a little bit of the backstory, but I'd love to dig in and get started with, why do you think travelers should make the effort to learn the local language of the places that they're traveling to?
Firstly, it feels to me like the most respectable thing that you can do. When you're going to a new place, there's nothing worse than witnessing, because you will still see it, witnessing other tourists just come in, wear what they want, speak their own language, and have no connection to the actual place, almost treating it just like, this is a hot temperature and there is a beach. And, not really thinking about where they are, rather than thinking about the the Instagrammableness of the destination. And so language comes in with that respectful treatment of the place that you've decided to visit. So, like I say, things like clothes and what you choose to wear, like, is this a place where you need to cover to the knee and the shoulders? And thinking about any other customs, like, is there, like in Thailand, how you have I think it's called the Y, where you're putting your hands together in a prayer pose and bowing gently when you greet people, those little things. And then the language should also be a part of that prior trip knowledge that you're thinking about and learning. And there is a benefit to this because so many people do just think, it's hot there, I want to go, I don't care too much about the country. It means that you really stand out. So recently I was in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka was way more touristy than I perhaps anticipated. And so you go to the beach and the prices are like, phew, way inflated because there's that many tourists. And no one's really learned the language at all because it's not an easy language to learn. There's not like, Duolingo, Sinhala, or anything like that. You would have to seek it out quite intentionally. And that means that if you even know a few words, you really stand out. The amount of times that I would order something in the language or just say hello to someone in the street and the wide-eyed, wow, you speak my language, in response just makes you feel so nice and makes you feel like there's more of a connection than simply having to rely on your own language or primarily English. So yeah, like that as well. Like it shouldn't be, we're talking about financially savvy travel. That can actually help you to get a little discount or to even get local price when the foreigner price is so prevalent. So if we think about, especially like in a market or getting a tuk-tuk or a taxi, that sort of local transport, there's no price list necessarily. It's very easy to inflate the prices. If you can at least ask, hello, with a smile, how much is it? There's a chance that they may not overcharge you as much as if you just rock up and say, hello, how much is this? Like without even trying or making an effort. So that's a big benefit too, is that there's this little financial gain on the side, which is quite nice.
There are a couple words that you said to me that really stood out is the intention and the planning piece. For me personally, as a frequent traveler, when I am traveling internationally, I do feel like learning the language is part of my planning. And I think we're going to talk a lot about what that looks like for folks, but it's the intentionality. It's like putting that as a primary. Also, one of the trends that we're seeing in travel for the last, I would say at least the last 2, 3 years is cultural immersion. So a lot of people are traveling to learn about different cultures, to really immerse themselves, to really have this cultural exchange. And of course, language plays like a huge part of that as well. So all the things that you mentioned there are 100% so important. So another question I had for you was, how does speaking the local language change perhaps the way you experience a destination? And after you respond to this, I will share an example of like how when I come back home, having been to that country, immerse myself in the language and the people, I can bring that to a lot of the conversations that I have like post trip years later. So anyway, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've noticed as well that even, going to a place and then going home, this isn't to say that I didn't care before, but I definitely care about the place more. Like I notice it when I see the name in the news. I can read that article and like have a bit of an understanding than just if I've never been and it feels very far away. So that's definitely a huge benefit. But in terms of language specifically, whether it's travel or not, I always see language learning as like a door ajar into another culture for me. So for some people, that door that is ajar to just learning more about the world might be learning about history. It might be music. It might be film. It could be anything. But for me, it's always been language learning. And it's like this little opening into the insights of what to expect or what a place is about. Like there's so much packed into language. One of my real favorite things is etymology, which is the study of like what words mean. So like breaking down words into their pieces of like, where did this word come from? Like this bit came from if we're talking about an English word, this came from Old English, but this came from French, then you can see, oh, so actually the French word, actually French is a good example because in Russian, there's a lot of French words, and the type of words that are in Russian and of French origin tell you a lot about the relationship that Russia had with France. There was a big admiration of like, wow, aren't they cool? Look at what they do. And so those sort of words tend to creep across. And that is a huge insight into the history, into the language, into the world of that culture and that language. And so that helps you as well to understand the world around you when you're in a place. So, for example, if you can read, if like, as long as there's not a brand new script and there's that extra thing to learn, which can be a wonderful experience, don't be put off by that. But if you can read the signs around you, being able to understand the odd word on a menu here or there that you're just glancing at for the first time, it's not just about speaking. I think a lot of the time when we think about language for travel, we think about communication and speaking and being able to do all of those spoken tasks, which of course, absolutely that's important. But for me, a big part of that is also understanding the written word and being able to read the world around me as well. So that really helped me to feel more comfortable in a new place if I know what's going on. And also the better relationships that you'll be forming have really changed my view of a place and the impact. And again, like you say, even just a few words. So, for example, in India, massive, massive country, I think 22, 23, if you include English, officially 22 recognized languages. I think that's the word that they use. It's not official, recognized. And every state, every journey that you take, there's a new language at the other end of that, of that train or of that bus journey. And so I didn't really learn much Hindi. I just wasn't very intentional with that. But I did make an effort to learn the first local language that I was going to encounter, Malayalam, in Kerala, and ended up spending 2 weeks on a homestay and being able to practice those early phrases with the family, being able to say, to the grandmother who spoke zero English, like, thank you for the food, it's delicious, was like so good. Like, it would have been a very different experience had I not had that little bridge to form that better relationship with them. So that's one of the biggest things, is that it just gives you a chance to experience a place better and to connect better with the people as well.
That connection, that bridge that you're speaking of, 100%. Not only is travel part of that, building that bridge, but also the language, as you mentioned, is a very big part. So for me, because I would say I'm pretty well versed in travel now, having been to 27 countries, like when I am traveling across the state or even like in my local area, when I meet someone, let's say from Ecuador, or I meet someone from, let's say from Iceland, like the fact that I've been there, we have an immediate connection, an instant connection. Most recently, so I'm a Disney person. I love Disney a lot. And Epcot, that theme park, has a world showcase, and pretty much you get to eat and drink and explore, all around the world. And when I go to, let's say, the German section, and I can say cheers in German, Prost, right? When I could say that, that person's reaction is like, oh, like that's different, like she knows what to say. Or when I was in the Italian section and I could say hello, but in the Italian accent, like how they say it, like I saw his face and he was not just like, doing his thing, but he looked up and he was like, he took attention to me because he could see that I said it in a way that feels authentic and natural. Do you see that as well when you are not only traveling, but like in your day-to-day interactions with people who may be from different countries that you visited as well?
Definitely, definitely. And it starts from myself. It starts from myself feeling that, oh, I've been there. It was great. Whereabouts are you from? Rather than just, oh, I'm from India. And then I can say, oh, whereabouts? I spent some time there. Like, it's a really nice way to like you say, to form that deeper connection and to have better moments with people, with strangers. And it's not about necessarily, oh, and now everyone that I've ever met from well is now my best friend. Like, it's not that. It's just in those moments that life can be so much better if we tolerate, first of all, each other first more. And then if we understand each other more, that's where a lot of that tolerance is going to come from. And then if we make an effort to understand each other more, perhaps through language, then even better. We're leveled up there completely. So yeah, I really do relate to what you're saying there.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. So, one of the things I know that there are people who have like learning a language on their annual goals where they're like, new year, new language, or new year, I'm going to focus on my language skills. And that's incredible. But there's also a group of people who, when they're traveling, they want to intentionally learn few key phrases, few essential phrases so that they can feel prepared and they feel like they were intentional in their trip. So, how much really should we think about learning when we have an upcoming trip? Is it, I would say, in terms of like length of time, should we give ourselves 6 months, a year, 3 weeks? Like, generally speaking, like, what's the time frame that you should probably, if you want to do this, you could start and it'll actually stick with you for your trip?
So really, it's as long as you have, it's as much as you can give. As soon as you know the trip's happening, go for it, get started. I've always found in my experience, the shorter the time period that I have compressed learning a bit of a language into before a trip, the quicker it fades after the trip. So the longer you have to give, if this is something that it's just for the trip, after that you don't care, then that's fine. But if you think actually it would be cool to remember a bit of Italian after I've been to Italy, then take as long as you can. And the danger there is that you think, okay, I've got 6 months, you just do one word today. And then you forget. And then the next day you forget. And it goes on like that. And actually you end up with the same amount as if you had gone really intense for a shorter time period. So it's less about the time period and more about the actual time that you can devote, like the actual hours. And then it's about what you do in those hours, right? So like you could say, okay, I've got an hour a day to learn Italian for the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. And in that hour, if you are just taking stuff in, just watching YouTube, just doing apps, just listening to audio lessons and not actually producing, if you're consuming and not creating, then when it comes to going to Italy, you might feel quite prepared. You might feel like, well, I've spent all these hours taking in Italian and immersing myself. But then you get there and you've not actually spoken to anyone. So the minute you step off the plane and you go to the immigration counter, you're like, oh, wait, how do I say? Because you've not practiced that. So it's about what you do in that time as well. So I recommend, of course, I'm not saying don't consume Italian, don't listen to, no, actually, you should do that. But you should also make time in the time that you have, whatever time that is, to practice speaking, to practice your sort of recall and make sure that, you're not just looking at the vocab list, you actually know it in here, in your head as well. So that's something that I think is really important. But the more time you have, the better. And then in that time, it's not necessarily about thinking, okay, I just need to cram as much as I can, because that, again, in my experience, I found can lead to overwhelm and then remembering less than if I had focused on a few essential phrases and remembered them much stronger than ending up being confused between like, oh, wait, do I say this and say that? Because those words are similar. And actually one of the similar words I don't need. I've worked with tutors before that are very keen to follow their method or their planning. But if I'm going for a specific reason, I don't need their full planning that's going to give me fluency in the language after, another batch of 50 lessons with them. I don't need to start from that same start point. I need a bit of adjustment for that. So it's having the confidence and the knowledge to know what to do in that time. And I'm sure we'll get into that and I can help with that today.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Cause I could definitely see myself like, even for Spanish, like I remember taking Spanish in high school and I was doing good. I'm always an A plus student, always an A plus student. So I did wonderful and great. today, when I'm trying to put a word to say, sentence to say to my mother-in-law, I'm like trying to go through the archive and try to pick out a word, and then I'm lost. And then now so much time has passed and I'm just like, I have to go revert back to English. So I think sometimes there's two things. I think sometimes there's a fear of pronouncing things incorrectly. And then there's just, again, sometimes you know it, but you just can't recall it at the time because of, for me, the lack of practice. So if there are listeners who are like, I'm ready to go on this trip. I got my essentials, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I got my essentials, but they're nervous about the pronunciation, how they say it. What would you recommend or tell them so that they could feel more confident and comfortable?
There's actually two things I picked out from what you were saying there. One is the fear of pronunciation, pronouncing stuff wrong. But the other one is, you mentioned lack of practice. So lack of practice, and I sort of touched on how important that is just a minute ago, but lack of practice really is, I always compare it to if you play the piano, right? You're not just going to play the piano for the first time when you rock up on stage at the concert that people have paid for and the spotlight is on you. No, you're going to practice on your own at home when no one can hear you, when no one can hear you mess up and make all those mistakes. And actually, this does connect to the pronunciation fears as well, because part of that pronunciation fear is not having had enough practice. So there is a link there. So what I would say is making sure that you are getting some practice, but also solo practice, not necessarily, practice doesn't just mean, okay, I need to book a whole batch of lessons so that, someone is there to hear me speak. You need more than that. So I always call it like a solo speaking habit, right? Get used to speaking to yourself, get used to speaking out loud, practicing when you are on the apps or with a textbook and you're, just saying things out loud then as well. That all counts. That all is included in the practice. And that will just help to lower the nerves and feel more confident. In terms of pronunciation specifically, have you ever heard, Danielle, that children learn languages better than adults?
Yes, I have. I have heard. I'm an example of that. I'm definitely an example of that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's so prevalent. And in some ways, it may be true. But when I've looked at all the research on this, there are two things that come up again and again for me. One is that children don't fear pronunciation. And the other is that children have less inhibitions. Again, massively connected. So they're getting the practice that you mentioned there being a lack of as an adult, and they're overcoming that fear of pronunciation because of that lack of inhibitions. And so when we're an adult, we might think, well, I've missed the boat. I'm not a kid anymore. Or we can think, well, actually, if I know that those are the things that children do better, I'm an adult and I have the life experience and the knowledge to be able to change the way that I learn languages to make sure that those things aren't a problem anymore for me, right? So with pronunciation, that's when you are going to need some kind of input from a human. So it could be, well, I say a human, now there's other options as well, but maybe that is working with an online tutor. Maybe you know someone that speaks the language that can help you practice and get used to it. Maybe there's local meetups you can attend. Perhaps you are using one of those, and I've not had much experience with them, so I can't vouch for them, but one of those slightly creepy AI language practice apps that are very heavily targeted to me on YouTube right now in the ads. Or maybe simply you are using, there's a website called Forvo, Forvo, and this is a pronunciation dictionary. So people can submit the way that they pronounce individual words. So if there's like an individual word that you're not sure on, you can use that website to hear it, often a native speaker speak it. And so that sort of thing can be really useful to just get a real insight into what it should sound like. But I do want to add, especially if we're talking about learning for travel and, not heading towards like mega fluency, your pronunciation does not need to be perfect to be understood. I spent 4 weeks going around Sri Lanka telling people that the food was rasamai, right? And every single time they would correct me and say, rasai. And I'd worked with an online tutor a few times before going to help me get familiar with the language. And I asked her the other day, I had a lesson just after I'd left, and I wanted to kind of check in on a few things. And I said, oh, one thing was I would say rasamai and people would correct me and say rasai. And I just could never remember. And so she said, oh, yeah, rasamai is like saying this is as tasty as something else. So every time I'm saying, like, oh, yeah, this is as tasty as something else I had the other day. Like, I just wanted to be telling them that their food was great. And instead, I was like comparing it to someone else's food. So, there's these moments where you will mess up and people will help you. If you've made an effort to learn the language and the relationship that you have in those moments with people is going to be stronger. We underestimate how willing people are to help us get to the right place that we want to be. It's an exchange, it's an interaction that we both benefit from if we're there to help each other out. And so, recognizing that it's okay, that you don't have to be perfect pronunciation from day one.
100%, because I'm going to be the first to say it. And my podcast listeners know that I have like funky pronunciation of certain English terms. Like, for example, in travel, we have itineraries. But for me, I naturally, if you just ask me, I say itineraries. So even so that someone commented on my podcast or review and they're like, I can't listen to her. She says itineraries with the Y, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, that is not only it's funny, but it's also humbling. Like even your native tongue, there are words that you may not master, or based on where you are in the country, you may say something completely different, like potato or tomato, there's just like so many different pronunciations there. So I think for me, when I'm traveling, like you mentioned, I kind of feel like a child sometimes where it's like, I'm trying and I think that people see that I'm trying and they're so much more willing to help me. And when they correct and help me, I can remember, for me personally, I remember it better because I can remember, oh, I said that incorrectly like 2 times and they corrected me. And for me, that really helps me to like get it and like know for the future to say it in the correct pronunciation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you say that you pronounce words like itinerary funkily, or like, I'm glad you didn't say wrong, because in my mind, there's no wrong way. If we especially look at a language like English, if we consider like how many dialects, how many varieties there are of that language, like we can't look at another version of English and say, that's actually wrong. It's incorrect. The grammar should be this. Like, no, from a linguist standpoint, that's not how we look at each other's language variety. We look at it with curiosity of like, oh, okay, I wonder where that's come from. Why do that group of people use the language in that way? Why do they pronounce words in that way that is different to the standard variety considered, or variety considered standard, quote unquote, over here? There's a curiosity there rather than just stepping in with a very critical eye and judging other people's grammar and other people's pronunciation as wrong, because that's not the case. Language variety exists. So I think that's always worth remembering as well, that it may not come out exactly how you wanted, but you never know, it might be correct somewhere.
I love that. I love that. For me, it was so funny when I got that like 1-star review and I was like, if I get a 1-star
Oh
review,
my goodness.
that's a good reason. That's a good reason, right? Like, cause that's super me. Like that is 100% me. And I hope all my listeners like laugh about it. Cause it's like, it's really, really, really funny. So we kind of teased that there are maybe perhaps some essential words that when we are traveling, we can just kind of make note to say, okay, here are a couple of words that we should kind of plan to learn and kind of feel good and confident about. So what are some of those essential words that you feel like every traveler should kind of have across the board?
So first of all, this is going to get quite listy. And if you're listening to this and then start trying to make notes, like, don't worry, I have a free vocab list, essential vocab list. I'll share the link with you, Danielle, and we can pop it in the show notes perhaps. I sort of see it as there being different levels, right? So bare minimum, let's say you just planned a last minute trip to a place that you do not speak the language. Bare minimum, hello and thank you, right? We can all do that. We can all get 2 words. Even the tourists in the highly overly touristed area, we can all make a little bit more of an effort. Hello and thank you. Then going on from that sort of next level would be just adding in a few more phrases that you're going to say again and again. So that would look like goodbye and please. I always want to say the opposites of hello and thank you, but it's not quite an opposite, but you know what I mean. So hello and goodbye, please and thank you. And yes and no, we can add in as well. And also, it's not just about a list of vocab and thinking of learning words, because there may be ways to say yes and no without words. You know, for example, again, to go back to India, this is more of a yes, this kind of nod of the head, sort of wobble of the head, rather than a full on yes, right? So it's kind of a yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's learning those different kind of gestures and little quirks of the place as well that might be different rather than just yes. That's going to help you to communicate yes and no as well. And then I would add into that level, how much is it? Like we talked about, knowing a few bits of the language and that helping you save a bit more money. This is the one that is most likely to help with that. You know, if you in a shop and you just walk up and say, how much is that? Versus, hi, how much is that in the language? You never know. You never know. It might help to get a more reasonable, less inflated price. Then there is a next level from that. And that is where the list gets a little bit longer. So I can talk through, I have my list, I can sort of read it. Like I say, I don't want it to get too listy. But yeah, from there, I would say adding in words like maybe. So we can say yes, no, and maybe. But it might even be a word. It might be that you can sort of, you know, maybe express that as well. And nice to meet you. Do you have or is there, right? So in this sort of short list for short-term travel, I don't have like a bunch of nouns like hotel, taxi, restaurant. Like either those words are the same or they're easy to figure out. They're easy to sort of imitate and mime a little bit, right? Nouns in general can be a bit of a block when it comes to speaking a language, because a lot of resources for vocab will be like very noun heavy, like dog, cat, fish. And you're like, oh, when am I going to talk about this? So do you have or is there? And then adding in that noun to make a full sentence. What is it? So maybe you're at a market, there's some unusual looking food you want to try, you want to know what it is, you want to get the name, you want to get the new noun for that food. Where? And again, you can easily say, where is the bus? Where is the hotel? By adding in those simple nouns as and when you learn them as you need. I have a handful of essential verbs. We'll keep them small and minimal. I have a reservation. I have whatever you want to talk about in that sense. I want or I would like. So this is your ordering term. And again, this is the English, but it may vary. So, you know, to go back to Sinhala and Sri Lanka, my tutor said, we don't really say it. It's a bit weird. You would say like, give me, right? Which in English, I wouldn't say too much. So it's worth knowing what the version is and what that meaning is. I go or I am going, you know, so maybe someone is saying, oh, hey, do you want a taxi? Do you want a taxi? You say, oh, no, thank you. I'm going just there. 5 minutes, you know, I walk just there. I go just there. You can piece together something with that. I need. So this is again useful for ordering stuff, for getting things like ticket, reservation, menu, right? So we can now, just with those 3 words, you know, like I say, I'm not going to give a full list of nouns, but you can say, I need a ticket. Do you have a menu? I want a reservation, and piece things together that way. 1 and 2, and any other numbers that are relevant. That could be if you are traveling with 3 people, then you're going to want to learn 3. So one of you isn't left out when you buy tickets. It could be that there's necessary currency words. So if the currency is very high and you're talking about paying 1,000 of the local currency, then actually the word 1,000 becomes relevant rather than just, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So thinking about that as well. What's the currency? What are you likely to hear back when you say, how much is it? And then finally, this is the bit that really irks me because it's so often missed on vocab lists, but it's the personally relevant stuff. So the personally relevant places. So what matters to you? Where do you want to visit? Let's say you collect stamps when you travel. So then you want to visit the post office, right? That becomes a relevant place to you. personally relevant medical words and personally relevant food or allergy words. So obviously we would prefer not to have to say, where is the hospital? I need a doctor. So if we can actually be able to say that in front at the beginning, well, to be able to say, I am allergic to shellfish, dairy, whatever it might be, that is going to be very, very helpful as well. Obviously it tends to be in very specific areas of a phrasebook. A phrasebook is very, very big and very good often. But yeah, we want that at the front end. So that's the short-term travel list of what I would say essentials. Some obvious, some perhaps a little less obvious.
Oh my gosh, I am like madly taking notes. So if you need the notes, we got the notes. And Lindsay has the a freebie for you all so you could download it. Because for me, I automatically, because I use a lot of these apps and I could spend months on cat and dog and bread and duck and cow. And it's like, I just need to tell them that I don't eat meat. Okay. No carne. That's all I need to say. But I'm not learning that because they have their own, they're not focusing on the traveler experience. So I love that. And I could definitely see why learning a lot of learning a lot of it sounds like verbs, like I have, I want, I'm going, I need. These are things that as a traveler, when you're speaking to someone who may be a wait staff or concierge or a taxi, like these are things that are very, like you're going to use these terms, use these words and phrases a lot. So 100%, this makes a lot of sense. And I feel like this is probably why, this is why we have you on the show. This is why we're talking today, but it's a light bulb moment for me as well as a traveler.
Yeah. And it's not to poo-poo nouns completely. They're still useful, but it's the personally relevant ones that are going to be worth your time and worth your effort. Like I say, a lot of stuff that you might need is similar or the same, or there's versions of. You'll notice as soon as you land in an airport, is it more common here to use the word toilet or is it washroom or bathroom? You'll see the signs and you'll be able to pick up on those things from the get-go. You'll see the sign that gives you the transport at the airport and it will have the version for taxi or bus. You'll be able to get that stuff when you're there. And if you can't, and you say taxi or bus, there is a chance that someone is going to understand and be able to help you. But if you just say taxi, they might think, are you asking them if they're a taxi driver? Are you asking where you can get a taxi? Are you asking how much a taxi is? It's less clear unless you've got those phrases or those verbs to help clarify what it is that you're actually after.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned signage, and that's another, I feel like an easy way, like when you land somewhere, you can see things like the stop sign, or like you said, bathroom, train, or arrows, right? So even if you don't know how to speak fluently, you could start picking up some context clues. Then right there, just on the visual, the signage. So can you speak to that as well as travelers, we're also looking at signage as well?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I use a lot. And it's something I'd say maybe probably over 10 years ago when, I've been doing my job a long time now. And in the beginning, when I sort of transitioned, I used to be an offline tutor and then I moved online. And then I was like, I keep going to people's houses or I keep meeting people online each week and saying, oh, how's your week been? What have you done in between? And the answer was always the same of, oh, well, I got busy and I haven't done much. People were relying on our lesson as their whole language time for the week. And of course, you need a little bit more in between, right? So I realized people didn't know what to do in between those lessons. I need to transition a bit. I need to talk about how to learn languages. So that's what I did. And I realized if I was going to do this online and talk about language learning, I needed to be learning. And so as you dig more into that space of language learning, there is a real emphasis on speak, 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 speak. Everyone wants to speak. And I felt a bit I mean, yeah, it's nice when I can speak a language, but also for me, why do I keep learning languages? And I really questioned myself on it. And the answer I came to was, I like to understand the world around me when I'm in a new place. I like to be able to read those signs. So it's always been a really big thing for me, not only in terms of comfort in a new place, but also in terms of learning. And I have, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Google Translate, but I use this most recently. I was like, how can I use this better I've just arrived in Malaysia a couple of days ago. How can I use this better here for this language? And so I've been on the metro and on the trains and stuff, reading signs and just adding those words, bookmarking them, because you can bookmark words. And I'm going to now, at some point when I get a chance to sit down, have a look back through that list of words and see, okay, what do I remember? What do I actually want to learn? What's useful? But I'm learning everywhere I go, because I'm able to keep track of those new words in that. And yeah, the signs and the language around you can be huge. It's not just necessarily about speaking, and it can feel very extroverted, and sometimes I feel that way, but not always. Sometimes I much prefer to just sort of keep myself to myself and admire a place without being like, hello, how are you? Like, for every person I meet. And so yeah, the signs can be a really huge factor in that. So learning a language to travel, not just for extroverts.
I 100%. I love that. And that kind of reminds me of my recent trip to Italy, where I could see a picture of the train and then it says train. And I'm like, oh, this looks like train, but it's tren, or like it's another word that I know in another language. So it kind of like puts a puzzle piece together, which I think definitely is something that I'm very cognizant of when I'm traveling. And like a big takeaway from this conversation that I'm getting from you, Lindsay, is this curiosity. You mentioned like wanting to understand the world around you. And of course, when you're traveling, that's prevalent because everything is so new. But I love also that we could take this love of travel, this love of learning languages, love of culture, and have this be something that we have in our regular day-to-day lives as well. So with that being said, you kind of teased Google Translate, which I feel like a lot of people will know and have heard of. But before we jump into Google Translate, are there any other resources, affordable resources that we can begin to tap into if we do want to now learn more languages?
Definitely. So when it comes to resources, I'm in the same boat. I want them as affordable as possible, because I know that if I put down a commitment of, okay, I'm going to spend $10 a month on this app, that alone for me isn't enough of an accountability to mean that I'm then going to use it and warrant its worth. So for me, free or affordable as best as possible is really, really helpful. So in terms of apps, there are the big obvious apps. Let's say Duolingo, but there's others that I think, as you mentioned, are teaching to their own agenda. They're teaching to give you a fuller, rounder fluency, which is great. It is absolutely wonderful that these things exist and are open and accessible to as many people as possible. But when it comes to short term, when it comes to travel, they're not necessarily the best. Like you say, you don't need to be dog, cat, bread, banana, dolphin. Like you want something a bit more useful than that. So there are a handful that I would recommend. And again, still with that being selective over the lessons that you choose. So UTalk is absolutely fantastic in terms of the variety of languages. I think it's like over 120 that they have available. If I'm looking for some kind of appness for a new language and I can't find it anywhere else, I know I'm going to find it on UTalk. If I don't find it on UTalk, then there's a problem. So UTalk is really, really good. And the way that they have things ordered for free, you get like free starter words, which are travel geared. A lot of the words we've talked about today are there in that free lesson. And then as you work through those games and practice, you get like coins. And then I think the coins unlock other stuff. But I will say, often you might find a UTalk sort of lifetime bundle deal online if you have a little look around. So it's worth mentioning that. Drops is another one that's great for travel. It's, I think, again, on the free plan, I have a lifetime plan, which I purchased a few years ago because I was like, I know that I just want access to everything on this. And again, lifetime plan for me is better to be able to be like, that's it, I've paid once and I'm done. And with that, with the full plan, you get to see everything. I think on the free plan, it's 5 minutes a day, and maybe there is some locked content, so it's worth checking. But their lessons, some of them are very advanced level vocabulary stuff that you wouldn't need right now. but some of them are really travel focused as well. So it's worth checking out their travel lessons. And Mondly would be the other one, where you can sort of filter through and decide which ones are travel. And again, another one that offers lifetime subscription as well as monthly subscription, as well as free availability too. So yeah, having a look at those three, picking the relevant stuff, but not leaving it there, not just saying, okay, I've got the app and I'm just going to keep tapping and swiping and there we go, I'll get fluent. No, as we've discussed by now, there needs to be more practice. There needs to be more practice from you speaking the language and making sure you know it. So other stuff in terms of resources for taking it in, YouTube. Oh man, YouTube is so good for language learning and often just underrated and not talked about too much because we do focus on apps a lot. But yeah, like you'd be surprised how many channels there are on YouTube teaching a whole range of languages. So even if you can't find something on YouTube, you may well find something on YouTube. So that's one to recommend. But of course, being selective still, right? Not just feeling like, okay, I found a channel, I need to go back to the oldest video and work my way through everything. You don't need to complete it. Like, it's not a challenge in that sense. You know, you can pick and choose the videos that are most relevant for you. So as you're searching on YouTube, be really strategic about what you're searching for. So rather than just learn French, thinking like, okay, learn French for travel, or essential travel phrases for French, or essential French for travel, whatever it is that you decide. And then another couple that are really good, Teach Yourself and Colloquial make really good language courses. You get a book and you get the audio. Nowadays, the best thing about this, like the books you probably, you don't really need, right? Unless you find one secondhand or whatever, like you don't really need the book for short-term travel. But the audio for both of these, and at least last time I checked, is free online. So Teach Yourself have like a library. Again, I think they have it in an app format too. Colloquial, if you type in colloquial language books audio on YouTube, it will come up. And that will give you the actual audio lessons from the actual course that is a paid for product, but it gives you the audio for free. The idea being that you would need the book. But if you just want those first early conversations, they tend to start in that place that we want as well. So they can be good for that. And then also another thing that perhaps is a little bit hidden or unknown, you're in the US, right? I'm not sure if this is exactly the same, but on my UK Spotify account, that's premium account, I get like, I think 15 hours a month free audiobooks.
Yes, we have that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And so those audiobooks, you can get language courses for free. UTalk have, again, a huge range of languages on there. And the UTalk ones are very much like word translation, phrase translation, right? Very traditional in that sort of format, but with music in the background. So it kind of helps. So there's those for the huge range of languages. And then there's others. There's Michelle Thomas audiobooks, language courses on there as well, which are really very, very good quality. There's loads. It depends on the language. But if you just search learn French, you don't need to be too specific on there. Select audiobooks and see what comes up. So that's the other thing. And then if you're really, really stuck, if you're learning a language that perhaps doesn't have much available, I would recommend Live Lingua Project. So this is like my kind of last resort. If I've not found anything in my usual places, I head to Live Lingua Project. And if you go just to Live Lingua, the website, it can be little bit tricky to find. If you Google Live Lingua Project, you'll get the link direct. And this is a collection that they've put together of free language resources, like actually free, not like kind of bootleg, illegal versions, actually things that are made available for free from Peace Corps. I always get the letters wrong. Is it like DSI, the Foreign Language Institute, FLI? I think these companies that have created these free language courses for their sort of clients or volunteers or whatever it is, and they're available in a huge range of languages. So if you're really, really stuck and none of those other things have helped, there may well be something there.
Well, that was a lot of great information, right? Like there's a plethora of content and resources out there. So, how do you know when you are ready to actually work with a tutor or work with someone like yourself? How do you know when you're ready to make that jump? I can imagine, like we mentioned a little bit, like accountability can play a big role. Like if I know I got to meet with my mentor every Wednesday at 7, that is a whole different commitment than doing 10 minutes of Duolingo. So, how do we know when we're ready to make that commitment?
Essentially, if you feel that things aren't as quick or as easy or as, I always think of successful language learning needed to be three things, right? Three F's of language learning, we call it: flexible, functional, and fun. So if you ask yourself, is everything I'm doing right now to learn this language flexible, functional, and fun? And the answer is more no than yes. That is when you would need to be thinking, right, maybe I need some external accountability or some support from, someone who has experience with this, whether that's a tutor, whether that is a language coach, someone like me that you decide to work with. Like, that tends to be the point. And a lot of people that I work with are actually very experienced at language learning. They've maybe learned one or two languages before to a really good level, and they're thinking, how can I maintain what I have? Like, I care about this and I want to do this. Or maybe they have learned one language to a decent level, and the next one is just like, what the hell is going on? Like, why can't I do this another time? I did it before. Why is it not happening now? But of course, sometimes people that I work with are beginners, and their last main experience was school. And so there's all this baggage that comes with that of, like, maybe you were told you weren't a language person. Maybe you were told that your grades kind of dictated to you that actually this isn't your subject, so leave it in the past. There's so much that can come from that and that can really linger. And so, yeah, if you feel like things aren't as quick or as easy or as flexible, functional, or fun as you want them to be, that's when you want to be thinking about reaching out and getting some support in that.
Okay, so before we wrap up, though, I would love to know. I'm always about taking the practical and putting it in real world because I feel that you probably have stories to share where, because you were intentional about learning a language, when you were traveling, you unlocked something special because of that commitment, that time that you took to learn that language. Do you have any stories that you could share where it's like, probably because I spoke the language or I tried, that offered me the opportunity to do XYZ?
Goodness, so many, but I'll try and keep to one. But so many I could share. So when I was in Cuba, and Cuba's a really interesting place to visit because Latin America in general, the more you can speak Spanish, the better your experience is going to be. You're still going to have a great time. There's still a lot to see and explore and enjoy. But if you speak Spanish, it really does unlock these little moments. And one of those in Cuba for me was a day where everything had gone wrong. So I was in Vinales, which, if you don't know, is just this wonderful place with hills like little lumps and like really unique landscape. Like, you sit and have your breakfast and people are pulling their ox cart, the chickens are crowing, everything's getting ready for the day. It's really, really cool place. And I thought, let's see, on the map, looks like I can walk over here. Let's go. Let's see where we can go. And ended up getting completely, because I love caves, right? So I was headed for a cave on the map that I found. And everything was bad. I got completely lost. All the paths just tended to end, even if on the map it said I could keep going. And then got very, very stuck in the mud. My shoes just fell off. It was like, whoa, what do I do? And then out of nowhere, there was just this guy in a tiny hut that was his sort of like farmer's hut, not like a house, but like a sort of shelter for farming. He saw us approach and was like, oh, yeah, brought out a can of water to help wash off the shoes and get the mud off the hands and all of this. Then just offered. I was like, oh, I was trying to see the cave, but, couldn't reach it, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. All in Spanish, of course. And he's like, oh, I can take you to the cave. I'm thinking, oh, I've been in these situations before. This is now where I get majorly ripped off. And he was like, yeah. I was like, well, how much? Just a couple of dollars or whatever it was. And it felt so honest and so real. And like I say, like I wasn't being ripped off. So, okay, let's go. So away we went on the cart of the horse, stopped off at like his tobacco drying hut and stopped off here and stopped off there, get to the cave. And honestly, if I'd been on my own, it would have been like, now what? Because there was a guy at this cave in the middle of nowhere, stood at the door, like waiting to take $1 or $2 for an entry. And so thankfully, because this guy was with us, it was a bit of a good communicator, a better relationship. We weren't then being ripped off. And yeah, in we go into this cave. The guy goes in with his torch, shows us around. Yeah, there's this stalagmite that looks like such and such. This one looks like so and so. And then there was this pool in the middle of this cave with nobody around. You know, you go on a tour to a cave or to a secret pool or whatever, and it's full of tourists and everyone's doing the Instagram, and you're like, okay, this is nice. But well, this was very much an experience that was just, this is nice, you know? And yeah, being able to chat to the guy all day on that ride and actually learn a bit more about him rather than just, oh, thank you, was so good. So that's a story where I knew a lot more of the language, but countless other examples where just a handful of words have meant so much.
And I think that drives everything that we talked about home today, because you just never know with just have that intention, a little bit of planning, how that can help you along the way, whether it's to make your trip better or in an actual really urgent situation as well. So Lindsay, this was incredible. I feel like we definitely went overboard, but it was because the conversation was just so good. And I feel like a lot of not only my listeners, but I know your viewers will enjoy this as well. So how can folks connect with you? And if they do want to work with you and they're ready to make that commitment, what's the best way to go about reaching out to you?
Yeah, so everything is on my website. It's lindsaydoeslanguages.com. Yeah, you'll be able to find all the ways that we can work together. There's plenty of options, like sort of mini courses about specific things, like learning and remembering vocabulary. That's one. So if you're like, okay, I've got the words, now what do I do? That's what you do. There's other things like film and TV and music and how to bring that into your language learning. But the best way we can work together is Language Life, which is a combination of self-study library, things you can do on your own and learn how to learn a language for you with the support from me at the same time as well. So yeah, all of that is on my website.